This is Breaking News.
Good afternoon. I'm Dana Tyler. Our breaking news coverage continues here on CBS News New York. The verdict in a jury unanimously finding former President Donald Trump liable for battery and defamation in the civil lawsuit filed by E. Jean Carroll. The jury is awarding Carroll $5 million from Trump. Jury made up of 6 men and 3 women. They started their deliberations this morning, less than 3 hours. Carroll had alleged Trump raped her in a Bergdorf Goodman department store dressing room in the mid-1990s. She says he defamed her in a social media post saying, "She's not my type." A lot of information, as well as we are talking about a former president and a candidate for re-election to the White House now facing this. Our Alice Gaynor has been there throughout this case a little more than a week, and she joins us live outside Manhattan Federal Court. Alice, first of all, let's go over that verdict sheet.
Sure, Dana, I have it right here. I was filling it out as this was all being read by the clerk. So for the first claim of battery, did Ms. Carroll prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Trump raped Ms. Carroll? They said no, but they did find that he sexually abused Ms. Carroll and that she was injured as a result. Because of that, they awarded her $2 million to compensate for those injuries. They also found that his conduct was willfully reckless. It was done with conscious disregard of the rights of Ms. Carroll. They awarded her $20,000 for that. Now, for the defamation claim, did Ms. Carroll prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Trump's statement was defamatory? They agreed yes. Did Ms. Carroll prove by clear and convincing evidence that the statement was false? Yes. Did Mr. Trump make the statement with actual malice? Yes. Did Ms. Carroll prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Ms. Carroll was injured as a result of his statement on October 12, 2022? Yes. So she was awarded $1 million for any damages other than the reputation repair program. They also awarded her $1.7 million for the reputation repair program. In making the statement, Mr. Trump acted maliciously, out of hatred, ill will, spite, or wanton, reckless, or willful disregard of the rights of another. They found yes unanimously, and they awarded her $280,000. So that's just the breakdown. So in total, she's being awarded $5 million. They began their deliberations around 11:50 this morning. The judge took his time and really gave them a number of instructions. Took him over an hour and a half to instruct this jury. We learned that before 3 p.m. that there was going to be a verdict. That verdict was read shortly after 3 o'clock. This jury has been paying attention throughout this trial. The judge noted that in his remarks to the jury before he discharged them. They're an anonymous jury, so we don't expect to hear from any of them. When they were selected, they were told it would be a good idea by the judge to even give each other fake names, not give their real names. And he also advised them, it's up to them if they want to talk to anyone about this case, but he advised them that they should not now and not for a long time identify themselves. And if they choose to do so, he said, do not ID anyone else in this jury. If you do, you owe each other that. Right now, we're expecting E. Jean Carroll and her lawyers to come outside, also Mr. Trump's lawyers as well. The judge said we were going to keep decorum in the courtroom. A couple of family members, people here on E. Jean Carroll's side, Alice, I noticed were crying when the verdict was read. Yes, Dana.
Alice, sorry. We have just to interrupt you for a second, a picture from our helicopter of a car leaving. E. Jean Carroll has left the courthouse. She did not stop at the cluster of microphones there and did not make any comment. I'm not sure if her attorney, Roberta Kaplan, is in the car with her, but we do know that E. Jean Carroll, who has left the courthouse. Also, Alice, I want to let you know that on Truth Social, Donald Trump has put out reaction to this. I have absolutely no idea who this woman is. This verdict is a disgrace, a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time. That from former President Donald Trump, who was not forced to testify in this, as it is a civil trial, not a criminal trial, was asked if he wanted to, Alice, we know, and he decided not to. Let me go back to what you were saying in that courtroom about reaction, and then we'll continue on. You said people were in tears?
Sure. So some people there on behalf of E. Jean Carroll sitting in the gallery. I noticed a couple of people were crying once the verdict was read, but otherwise we didn't see too much reaction. As you mentioned, E. Jean Carroll just left without speaking to reporters. We anticipate at some point her or her lawyers will release some kind of statement. We're not sure if Attorney Joe Tacopina and his team have left the courthouse. We do have camera crews at all of the entrances and exits to see if they're going to comment. As you mentioned, former President Trump commented on Truth Social. He also made a post this morning talking about the trial, which he was advised not to. The judge spoke to both sides at the beginning of this trial and said, make sure your clients don't say anything to inflame any civil unrest. A couple of times, Mr. Tacopina had to be spoken to, talk to your client, because Mr. Trump had again posted other comments in regards to him testifying. You're right, this is a civil case, not a criminal case. He did not have to testify, but he was given ample opportunity to do so. Last week, his attorney said that he was going to waive his right to testify. He made some comments over in Ireland as he was golfing to other reporters, saying that he was going to end the trip early, come to New York because of this trial. He wanted to confront E. Jean Carroll. That did not happen. The judge also said that the attorneys had until Sunday night to file a motion just for the sole purpose, if he was having second thoughts to testify, they would be able to reopen the case. Maybe, he would listen to it, not necessarily grant the motion, but they had that option. They did not file a motion Sunday, so he did not testify. But jurors did hear from Mr. Trump in his own words that taped deposition that took place back in October. I want to talk about a couple of things because this is a civil trial, Dana, not a criminal one. The standard is lower. They do not have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. When it comes to preponderance of evidence, you heard me mentioning that when I was going through the verdict sheet here. A preponderance of the evidence, that means it more likely than not happened. It can't be 50-50. It could be 51-50 that they believe her. There has to be, even just the slightest bit that they believe her more than him. If it had been 50-50, well, then they would have failed and they wouldn't have proven their case. The burden of proof was on the plaintiff, E. Jean Carroll, and her attorneys. We want to point out there was no physical evidence here in this case. What they were relying on was the testimony of E. Jean Carroll and also the witnesses they called, her two friends, two journalists who she claims and who they took the stand and testified. She told after this attack back in 1996. So they took the stand and they described how she told them about this attack that she says took place in 1996 in the dressing room of Bergdorf Goodman. The jury, it turns out, in fact, believed her and believed the 11 witnesses called to the stand on her behalf, including E. Jean Carroll herself. Mr. Trump's side, they did not present a case. In his closing, Mr. Tacopina said their case was based on the cross-examination of these witnesses. He said, how are they going to call anyone to the stand to prove this didn't happen when E. Jean Carroll was not giving them a specific date? They said they were unable to call any witnesses. They were expected to call an expert witness, a psychiatrist, but that person ended up not making it, so they called no one. Again, the jury sided with E. Jean Carroll here, and they are now awarding her $5 million. We're outside of the federal courthouse waiting to see if lawyers for Mr. Trump will respond. E. Jean Carroll and her attorneys have left, but as soon as we get some more reaction, Dana, we'll bring you the very latest.
Okay, Alice, again, if you are just joining us, the former president found liable for battery, count one, battery, sexual abuse. She had claimed rape. They said sexual abuse. Count two, defamation. The jurors, 9 people, 6 men and 3 women. Now, can we go to Cheryl? Cheryl Bader is with us right now, and we're so fortunate to have her from Fordham Law School. Cheryl, your reaction to this decision in the civil lawsuit finding the former president liable in battery and defamation?
Yeah, so this is quite a verdict, and the jurors barely had time to finish their lunch before deciding. And I think this is the next step for the Me Too movement to show that, somebody of great privilege can be adjudicated to be responsible for this sexual assault. And so, even though it's not a criminal case and the burden definitely is quite a bit less, you have these jurors, and it's an unanimous jury that decided that the former president did in fact sexually assault this person, E. Jean Carroll.
Cheryl, one of the things, in speaking about the Me Too movement, which we know happened more than a couple decades after the sexual assault in the department store. Can we talk about statutes of limitations, specifically in this New York law, extending the statute of limitations in sexual assault civil cases? Talk about that, please.
Right. So this is the result of the Adult Survivors Act, which is a law that gave this 1-year window where anyone could come forward and bring a civil claim for sexual assault during this period of time, even if they would otherwise be time barred under the statute of limitations. Just to mention also that the statute of limitations at the same time have been extended so that there is more time now for somebody to come forward. And I think this is a lot of the education that the Me Too movement has done to recognize that that sexual assault is extraordinarily traumatic, and that it often takes years, decades for somebody to feel comfortable coming forward and sharing the intimate details of this trauma. And so I think it's so important that there was this window to make up for the past, but also that there's been a change to extend the statute of limitations now going forward.
Also, federal law, if I'm not mistaken, Roberta Kaplan calling two other accusers of Trump to prove that Trump had a modus operandi of semi-public, attacking people in semi-public places. What about that strategy from Ms. Kaplan?
Right. So we've seen this before in the Harvey Weinstein case, in the Bill Cosby case. And it's a tricky evidentiary question because we want to be careful. The jury is not allowed to take what we call propensity evidence. So we don't say, well, if somebody's done this before, they might do it again, or that they're a bad character. But here, because it had to do with sort of the modus operandi, so that the pattern that he shows of, just like we saw in the Hollywood Access tapes, or Access Hollywood tape, that he would approach someone and just grab, kiss or grab or grope them, and then later on say, they weren't my type, right? As if that is actually a defense in a sexual assault case. And so we see this pattern of conduct, and so they were able to bring in this evidence under that theory.
Just to let our viewers know again, the former president, Donald Trump, has responded to being found liable, saying on Truth Social posting, "I have absolutely no idea who this woman is. This verdict is a disgrace, a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time." Cheryl, let's talk about the defense strategy you touched on it there, of calling no witnesses, and at one point even Mr. Trump saying that he couldn't go, but that's not true. He was allowed to speak if he wanted to. So no witnesses. I'm saying they're going to go by tearing apart Carroll's character and finding, discrepancies in her recollection of what happened. Fair to say that all backfired?
Absolutely. So first of all, he had no obligation to testify, but certainly when someone is accusing you of this conduct, you think you'd want to come forward. And also, I think the jury, right, they want to see that person. I mean, they heard and saw video depositions, but they're sitting there, they're taking time out of their lives, and for him not to come forward and look them in the eye and say, I didn't do this, I think they did punish him for that, and rightfully so. Just to make note, because I heard, when you were talking before, saying that, because this is different than a criminal case. So of course he would have the right in a criminal case as well not to testify and not to incriminate himself. But in both instances, he would have that right. And he decided not to exercise that right. And instead, a strategy of trying to undermine her credibility. And clearly the jury found that she was credible. And even though they didn't find on the sort of rape aspect of battery, they found that she told the truth, and that, he brought her into this, room in Bergdorf Goodman, and that he did sexually assault her on under, physical compulsion, because that's what, sexual abuse, it's actually a crime in New York, and it's a felony. It's a low-level felony, but it's a felony.
What about, you touched on the Hollywood Access tape and also the deposition, which I believe was from the wintertime of the former president, and the photo that was shown and the confusion. He's saying E. Jean Carroll was his former wife. Again, his attorneys, Tacopina, knowing that is part of it. That just seems, again, giving it away, doesn't it?
Right. So, I mean, again, they brought this in to show, right, that he is lying, right? That this is, this is a pattern, that he'll say whatever he needs to say to get out of a situation. And so, they're catching him in a lie. And also, I think this, hopefully, undermines such an offensive defense to say, well, I didn't do this because she's not my type, as if there's a type that one would sexually assault.
We talked a little bit about the Adult Survivors Act that Governor Kathy Hochul signed, and she has tweeted, "I was proud to sign the Adult Survivors Act so brave survivors like E. Jean Carroll could have their day in court. This law gives survivors the right to have their voices heard." It is a different time, we know, and decisions individually, if you are going to say this happened to me, who you tell, what emotions you show, and fast forward to the time of Me Too and the empowerment and the information sharing, as well as the legal decisions that have opened some doors for women and men to go to court with these types of things. Can you just history perspective as we look at this? Is it too soon, or can you just give me another sense of what does this mean?
Right. Well, I think we've seen a lot of baby steps in recent times, but any step is a positive step. I think there needs to be more training, in prosecutors' offices. Those things are being done, but understanding that we need to take a more trauma-informed response to people when they come forward, understanding how memory works. There's a lot of neuroscience around, how you remember certain events and how it gets stored in your memory. And so understanding that somebody may remember very particular details but not remember something else, and that that's natural. Also understanding the fight, flight, freeze response. There was a lot of hay made by the defense that she didn't scream. Right? We wouldn't say to somebody who is mugged and their jewelry is stolen, well, I don't believe you that you were mugged because you didn't scream. Right? Why do we have that view that somebody who is accusing somebody of rape has to scream? So I think that we are starting to see some of these myths tackled, but I still think there's work to be done.
Yes, the defense also saying she decided to go back and shop again at Bergdorf Goodman. Why would she do that if it was so upsetting? And that she'd said she was a fan of The Apprentice. Why would she do that? Let's talk about the damages that this jury of 9 awarded. $5 million, not all just one lump sum. How does that work? Compensatory and punitive? Can you help us understand that?
Right. So they had an expert come in to talk about the damage to her reputation and to give opinions on sort of what that value is. Then there's also the punitive damages, which is really just a way to punish this individual, finding that they've acted with malice or some intent to really be hurtful. And so the juries are allowed to impose that additional damage on top of what it would take to compensate her for her losses. But of course, when you're dealing with emotions and trauma, right, there's nothing that really gives you back that time, that self-esteem, that ability to trust other people. So, of course, money can only do so much in terms of restoring and repairing someone.
She has said also that the attack kept her from having any other romantic relationships in her life, just speaking about the impact emotionally. Charges, per se, charges. There are not charges, right?
That's correct. It's not a criminal case. It's just a matter of compensating her monetarily. And so, again, this is the equivalent in some respects because the battery, the cause of action in what we call tort law for battery, is is somebody, having physical contact or touching somebody and that causing them harm. And so here, right, in the verdict sheet, they laid out the possible ways that he would have sort of touched her and the ways that those were damaging. And so here there was either rape, forcible touching, or the sexual abuse. And so the jury found that this was sexual abuse, which is sexual contact under forcible compulsion.
We do know that Donald Trump's attorney, Joe Tacopina, as we have a camera on some microphones outside. We have not seen him leave the building, so as at this point, and not sure that he's going to speak. He tends to, so we might just hear that. E. Jean Carroll has, there are the microphones outside the courthouse. E. Jean Carroll left the building pretty quickly after the jury's decision, less than 3 hours of deliberation. Can the attorneys for the former president, is there an appellate, can they appeal in any way, any more legal action? What are their options?
So they can appeal the verdict, but there has to be a grounds for appeal. And so one ground might be the letting in of this evidence that they may argue is really propensity evidence. In other words, these other individuals that said they had similar encounters with Donald Trump. I think they had also moved for a mistrial, saying that the judge's rulings were sort of against them and pro E. Jean Carroll. But remember, the judge is in charge of their courtroom, and they're given a lot of deference in terms of making evidentiary rulings and sustaining objections and things of that nature. And it really came down to an issue of credibility and who the jury believed. And unless there was something about the instructions that the judge gave to the jury has the ultimate right and power to decide on issues of fact and credibility. So I don't see there being a lot of issues for appeal, but I'm sure we will see an appeal.
Cheryl Bader, professor at Fordham University Law School, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll be speaking again, but thank you for all of the insight on this. We appreciate it.
It's always good to be with you. Be well.
And you too, be well. The former president, Donald Trump, has reacted to the jury's verdict, saying, "I have absolutely no idea who this woman is. This verdict is a disgrace, a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time." And again, just sometime between 2:30, 3 o'clock, we were told that the jury in this civil lawsuit that E. Jean Carroll brought against the former president had reached a verdict less than 3 hours and found Donald Trump liable for battery, count 1, sexual abuse. She had alleged rape. The description that they decided on, sexual abuse, there were choices. Count 2, liable for defamation. We are now joined by another guest, Jane Manning, director of the Women's Equal Justice Project and a former sex crimes prosecutor. Thank you, Jane, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your reaction to this, and not only the decision, but the quickness.
It's a remarkable verdict delivered with remarkable speed. 3 hours, including lunch break, for jurors to have to fill out a verdict sheet that asked them multiple questions of fact and law that they had to answer. It suggests that there was strong consensus among the jurors from soon after they walked into the jury room. The verdict itself is a milestone for the Me Too movement. It's a milestone for women. It's a milestone for Americans who wondered if Donald Trump would ever be held accountable for any of the misconduct that he has bragged about or committed. It's a big day for justice in America, but especially for survivors of sexual assault.
When we reflect on decisions, one of the subject matters is the makeup of a jury. 6 men, 3 women. What do you infer from that?
What I infer from that is that the men on the jury were outraged and repulsed by Donald Trump's behavior and by his words about the way he treats women, just as the women on the jury were. And I'm not terribly surprised by that. There are many men in my own life and many men I know who were outraged by the Access Hollywood tape, who were outraged when they heard the voices of 26 women who came forward to report their own experiences of sexual assault and abuse by Donald Trump. It's not shocking to me that the 6 of those 9 jurors who were men were ready to hold Donald Trump accountable for his behavior.
And speaking of other women who have accused him of sexual misconduct, so what do you think this verdict means for them?
So I'm an attorney who works for survivors of sexual assault, and I will tell you that since the verdict was read less than an hour ago, my phone has been going off with texts from survivors who are jubilant. And I mean survivors who had nothing to do with the Donald Trump case. I just mean survivors of other sexual assault cases. They are jubilant at this verdict. They feel like it's a ray of hope for other survivors who want to hold their perpetrators accountable. For women who have accused Donald Trump, I think there's a special satisfaction. I don't know that any of those women expect to achieve justice for their own experiences with Donald Trump, but I think that knowing that he has been held accountable by one woman for sexually assaulting her is enormously satisfying to all of those 26 women.
When you're talking about the reactions that you're getting, what about women who've said, I've just not been able to, but yeah, now maybe I want to talk to an attorney and I want to file suit against my attacker. What steps should they take?
I hope that this verdict will feel like an encouragement to women who want to try to hold attackers accountable. I will say that this is important to understand. This verdict shouldn't just be an encouragement to survivors, but it should also be an incentive for the rest of us to work hard to continue improving the justice system for other survivors. A lot of the things that E. Jean Carroll had going for her in this trial, good legal representation, the other women who were allowed to testify, the Access Hollywood tape that was allowed to be played, the Adult Survivors Act that's in effect here in New York, a lot of those are advantages that are still not available to survivors in most sexual assault cases. And we have to work hard to deliver a justice system that is worthy of all survivors and capable of giving a fair shot at justice to all survivors, as it did for E. Jean Carroll.
As you were following this court case, Jane, just tell us your reactions along the way. We know E. Jean Carroll was the first to testify, very detailed, very emotional, although there were questions from Joe Tacopina, of course, on her not being able to say the exact day, the season, those types of things. But can you just give us some of your reaction to how Ms. Kaplan, Mr. Tacopina, days you went, oh gosh, this is moving this way, oh gosh, this is moving that way, as an observer with knowledge?
E. Jean Carroll struck me from the first day of her testimony as a witness who had one agenda, and that was to tell the truth as fully and candidly as she could. She even talked about things that maybe didn't look great for her case. So the fact that when Donald Trump first attacked her, shoved her up against a wall, she said that her reaction was to try to diffuse it by laughing. And even that afterwards, when she called a friend, she was still kind of laughing in kind of a frantic way. The friend, Lisa Birnbaum, didn't actually describe it on the stand as laughing. She said it sounded more to her like hyperventilating. But this was something that Joe Tacopina seized on and asked Jean Carroll about. He attacked you and you started laughing. And she said, yes, it was a way to try to throw cold water on him and try to stop the attack. But what I'm getting at is that some of the things E. Jean Carroll described, where her reaction to this assault maybe didn't match the script of what we think of as a perfect victim, a TV movie rape victim, those may have been some of the things that in the end made her credible. After all, if she was making up a story, she could make up any story she wanted. She didn't have to talk about those things that made her an imperfect victim. And so in the end, those things that made her a quote unquote imperfect victim may have been some of the very things that made her a very credible witness.
Again, the jury today, 6 men, 3 women, rejecting E. Jean Carroll's rape claim against Donald Trump and finding him liable for battery, specifically sexual assault, and also finding him liable for defamation in the 1996 attack in a Bergdorf Goodman store right up Fifth Avenue at 57th Street in a dressing room. Jane Manning, I know you have a lot going on today. What's in your heart right now? What's priority for you?
In my heart, I'm just feeling grateful to E. Jean Carroll. I'm also feeling acutely aware that not all survivors have a fair shot at justice, given some of the obstacles that many of them still face when they do report sexual assaults. And so what I'm also feeling today is a determination to redouble my efforts and a hope that other people will redouble our efforts to continue building a better system to deliver justice to all survivors.
Jane Manning, thank you so much for your perspective and information and reaction to the verdict. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have cameras. Our reporter Alice Gaynor, who's been covering this trial from the beginning, and we heard from her a while ago as well, describing what was going on in the courtroom. E. Jean Carroll leaving the courthouse very soon after the verdicts were read, and we have not heard her microphones stand out there outside the courthouse, and no one has stepped up to it. We have not heard from the defense attorney as well. However, we have heard from Donald Trump, who posted on his social media, "I have absolutely no idea who this woman is. This verdict is a disgrace, a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time." Our coverage will continue throughout the afternoon and coming up on CBS 2 News at 5. Again, a jury finding Donald Trump liable for battery and defamation in a lawsuit brought by writer E. Jean Carroll. She's been awarded $5 million. We'll have full coverage with Maurice and Christine, CBS 2 News at 5. Dick Brennan and I will see you at 6. For continuing coverage, visit our website, cbsnewyork.com. I'm Dana Tyler.
This has been breaking news.